Hello, everyone. Let's make sure we can see Alwyn properly there. I didn't mean to make you so small. We would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we are creating and streaming from today. We'd also like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. My name is Flynn, and the recently small and now large person over here to my right is Alwyn Hunt, our 3D expert from Adobe and also the rookies. Welcome, Alwyn.
Hey Flynn, how's it going?
It's great. I'm so pumped for this session.
Yeah, I've been actually looking forward to it because it's as we all know, it's a new tool and I haven't had much time to actually play around much with it as well. So it's been a real learning curve for me, and hopefully I can bring that learnings across to the viewers today.
Yeah, this is really cool. So we're going to be jumping into the new app Modeler. So 3D app, so you can sculpt from the desktop or also from VR. So we'll tease a little bit about that towards the end. But today we're going to be focusing on the desktop version. So opening it up fresh, checking it out. I've had a bit of a play with it. I'm really enjoying it. It's nothing like a new app and a new field to kind of really like take you back to school a little bit. It's quite fun navigating the menu and trying to figure everything out. So we've got Alan here to help us out. I'm going to ask lots of questions. So throw your questions in chat as we're rolling along. But Alan, before we jump into the app, can you give everyone a bit of a background about yourself?
Yeah, so my background's and I've come sort of from visual effects, where I spent 20 plus years working as a 3D artist, and now I'm a specialist within the Adobe organization. Like you mentioned as well, I'm also the co-founder of the Rookies, which is really about helping young people get into creative industries with CG and 3D and games and so forth. So yeah, looking forward to jumping into the show.
All right, let's do it. Well, when you're ready, I can flick over to your screen. We've got a cute little robot here. We need to name that robot if it doesn't have a name yet. That can be a job for for us in chat. And Halloween themed, which is cool. So what are we looking at here?
Yeah, this was just a little piece, and like I said, I only just started playing around with 3D Modeler, and I just really wanted to be able to quickly bang something together and actually run it through the pipeline, or take a 3D model from Modeler and bring it into some Substance Painter. So it was Halloween, and I just did this little character. It's based off a concept by Matt Dixon, who does this cute little robot series. So I just had a little bit of fun with that, and I loved actually the organic sculpting nature of 3D Modeler. And I don't know if you experienced that as well, Flynn. But yeah, it was just a load of fun, and I'm really keen just to show people how easy it is to use. For today's session, I'm going to just focus on the desktop, and then on Thursday we're going to move it into that VR headspace. And today I just really want to break it down into bite-sized pieces and show you through the interface what each of the sort of the tools do, and then be able to kind of have that expertise after today's session to be able to go, all right, cool. How do I set this thing up? Which was a bit of a pain point for me. So I'm going to run through that as well, and also just the difference between the VR and the desktop application, which is not a lot, but I'll cover that as well.
Awesome. Sounds great. Well, let's jump into it. So if you have Creative Cloud, correct me if I'm wrong as well, you can just download this and play along. I think it's PC only at the moment. Sorry, Johanna. But yeah, you can jump in and follow along. Check it out.
Yeah, exactly. So I've just got my desktop Creative Cloud app open here. That's always a mouthful for me.
That's a mouthful. Yeah.
And then you can see you've got your applications here, so you can just launch Modeler from here. There's another little learn more here, and this is cool because there's a couple of little VR tutorials that you could follow along with, and some creative ideas. Also, if you wanted to see if it works on this device, it'll open up a little web viewer just showcasing the specs that you'll need for it. Like you said, Flynn, it's not available for Macs at the moment, and that's scheduled for the end of next year, 2023, hopefully a little bit earlier. But there's lots of little bits of information here. So I've already launched it, and I've got it open here in the background. And again, you're greeted with this little interface. There's some things that I just wanted to point out here. There's a Modeler Mondays, and this is a live stream, and they just get guest people from the community to demonstrate Modeler and what the skills and techniques that they've learned. So there's some really amazing artists that have come from Oculus Medium, because Medium is what Modeler. So Adobe acquired Oculus Medium a number of years ago, and they've adapted that technology to what is known as 3D Modeler today. So there's a
cool.
whole
Bit of a history there.
Yeah, a whole community of amazing artists that already sit behind it. So it's really interesting to hear their experience of it now as this new sort of product. So definitely check out Modeler Mondays, and there's some old recordings there as well. If you got questions, or you can think of a feature that you'd like to add to it, then jump on our Substance 3D Discord channel there, and you can be able to give some input there. And Clay Time, what is Clay Time? Clay Time is, I can't even remember what that is. Maybe it's time for, again, that's just a session that's hosted on a Discord server as a channel there.
Right.
There's a couple of videos that you can see, user guide and setting up your VR, which I'm going to cover a little bit about, because to be honest, I didn't think it was completely clear, but I am guilty of not reading a lot of the instructions. I'm one of those people. So
Yeah,
hopefully I can make it easier for people to understand it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a file new, and what we're greeted with is this blank scene, and we've got one cube in here, and this is our clay tool. So the concept with this 3D program is that you're actually, like the name suggests, you're actually sculpting a piece of clay. Think of it like that. So there's other 3D programs like Max and Maya and Blender, where you're starting from primitives, basic geometry, and you're just blending them together. This is really kind of like a unique space where you're actually just starting with a block, and that block can be, any shape. We can start with a cylinder, or, whatever it may be, a nut, bolt, whatever. We can start with anything. And I'm going to get more into what each of these do as we go through. But for just the start, I want to just show you the kind of the interface and how I'm, rotating around that. Now, if I hold down my Alt key on the PC and use my right mouse button, click, you can see we can do the sort of the scroll, and I'm just holding down my Alt button for each of these movements, and left mouse button clicking here to rotate around it. Middle mouse button to move around my scene, and you can see with those little dots there, that's really showing us where the origin is of this is. So if I move that out of the way, you can see here, this is kind of where things get created.
Okay,
so,
cool.
And on this piece of clay, we've got these funky little colors around it, and that's really showcasing the axes, right? So in a 2D, you'd only have a sort of an X and a Y. In 3D, you have X, Y, and Z. So I can translate this in any of those directions, across, up, or in that direction. If I wanted to put it back onto that dot or reset it, then I can just click on this little reset down the bottom here, or I hit R on the keyboard and it will reset it back to that center for me.
So is that different to like Command Z? Because that's what I would naturally try to do.
Yeah, I could have done Command Z as well. But sometimes, you don't want to sit there and do like a 20 Command Zs,
Right.
just to try and get it back. So that's just a really quick way to bring it back to that origin or that center point there. And once it's there, I can do a couple of things. So you could see that I translated it, and there's these other 3 little dots. Can you see them I'll scroll in, but can you see those little dots there?
Yep.
Yep, cool. If I just change that back to a cube, now I can use the scale, and there's a big dot out here. Now, if I just click on that, I can scale this object, and it'll scale what they call uniformly, or it'll scale, the whole thing. And if I go back and I select one of those small dots, it'll scale it in that direction, right? So I can either scale it up and down, side to side, or in that direction. So it's just giving me a few different scale options of my cube here. Now, if I hold down Control and then click one of those dots, it will then scale just that selection or just that side that I've got selected.
Cool.
That just makes for really easy being able to scale things at at different heights based on just those little handles. Again, I'm just holding down the Control button and clicking on each of those points. If I wanted to go back and go, oh, this is not the right shape, I've messed it up or whatever it is, then I can just double click on that cube again and it will reset everything for me.
So
Or
it remembers what the starting shape was.
Yeah, it remembers what the starting shape was, so that it's just like, okay, cool. I just need to go back to that original shape. So you can just double click on that. Now I've got that, and then if I want to rotate this cube, then I can just simply hold these little circle handles and be able to rotate it manually like that.
Cool.
Again, if I just do the reset, it will bring it back. If I hold down the control button, you'll see what happens. And I'm holding control down, and then I click on that circle, and now it gives me these little dots, which just helps snap and just more precision in my rotation. If I go back to 0, you can see that it's doing it in 22.5 increments or 45, right? So it just helps break that into nice rotation segments for me. I'm still holding here, and I'm inside this circle. If I go outside that, you can see how those dots just changed, and I was able to get even smaller, like 15% angles there.
All right.
15 degrees, not percent. 15-degree angles.
What are you holding down again?
I'm just holding down the control button.
Control. Okay, cool.
And then I left mouse button, click on that circle, and then I go outside the circle and it changes, or back inside the circle and it'll give me just different increments, which is kind of really nice if I really just want to get precision with that snapping of the rotation.
It's really cool. It seems like this is already because I've already played around with it, so I should be taking notes, but I'll just rewatch the stream, mute myself or something so I don't have to listen to my own voice. But it's interesting that it's quite a hidden interface, in terms of as soon as you said that, I'm sure it's very natural once you get used to it, but you do kind of need to know it to be able to do that, because you've just done so much more that I kind of wish I knew how to do when I first kind of opened it out of the box, right? It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest too, Flynn, I only started learning this a few weeks ago as well. So it's all. But the cool thing is with this is that you can't break anything, and sometimes just holding keys, you make discoveries. But if you're not sure, then a great place to come is, and I've got it open here in the web browser, is if I just minimize that, and I'll just bring up the web browser there, and we've got it. Did I close that down? Yeah, here. There's actually a page which has got all the shortcut keys. Where is it? Yeah, this one here.
Cool.
So you can actually just go through, and it's, I remember back when I was learning Photoshop, and people would say, remember the shortcuts, it'll speed up your workflow by 100 times or whatever it was, right? And you try and memorize them all, and you go, oh my goodness, there's so many, I can't. The cool thing with this is there are not too many. And once you get a few of them in your head, then you pick it up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So and I think if you go to the help up here and you go to user guide, that'll take you to that where you can find those shortcuts for the keys.
Oh, cool.
Okay. There's also links to those other links that I showed you on that little pop up at the start, that interface. So. We've got our piece of clay, and I've got this sort of square here. There's a few parameters underneath this one, the properties that I can change. So maybe I wanted to taper the top, or I wanted to round the edge. There's things that I can do at this point, right? So I'm just going to scale this back to something like this. Again, I might reset it to that pivot point. I might just extrude out that top part there, and I've got this kind of rectangle piece here. So I'm going to just taper that a little bit, and then I'm going to round the edges just to kind of get that nice, take off those sharp edges. And I might just fill it, which is just smoothing the tops. Essentially, it's smoothing those edges there. Now, you see how I went way out of there, and I'm like, oh my goodness, where's it all gone? If I hit F on the keyboard, it should reframe everything for me. Is that your little one in the background?
Yeah, can you hear her? One second.
It's okay.
You keep going. 1 second.
All right, cool. So yeah, if you hit F on the keyboard, it will reframe everything for you. Like I said, maybe you just got stuck and it wasn't the shape that you wanted. So again, I could double click on the cube and it would reset everything for me. Now, once I've got a shape that I'm happy with, I can do apply. And basically that just tells the program, okay, cool, I'm happy with this piece. Now I want to move to the next piece. So if I move that gizmo, you can see that it's locked. Now we've got that solid piece that we can work with. If I go to the select tool up the top here, it will select our object, and now I can, move it, translate it, rotate it, do whatever I want with it. I can also add it to a layer. Now there's a little menu down the bottom here, and you see create a new layer with that. So there's a couple of places that I can do that. I can either do it down here, or I can right click and it brings up this other little interface here. Now there are only the two sort of tool set, these two palettes. So don't be like, oh my goodness, where did that come from? Because there are only two real main areas for that. And you can see you can create a layer here. So there's a double up of where that is, and it's, some people are used to right clicking and bringing up these menus. Other people just want to keep it tucked away. So I can add that to a layer, and you can see there, and I'm just going to move that piece out of the way, that it changed color there, and that's just to say, hey, you've added it to a new layer. That's cool. It's just a visual cue that I know it's been added to a layer. So
that's awesome.
Got that piece there. I'm going to go back into my select tool. I'm going to select this. I'm going to hold down the control button, and I'm going to rotate this 90, and I've got my little shape here. So what I'm going to do next is be able to create, so I'm going to go back into my clay tool here. I've got this first section, and I'll just show you some of the other ones. So you can see here, and by default, it automatically created that shape, but it's also inherited the dimensions of that other one. Again, if I didn't want that, I could just bring it back to here and bring it back to that base shape, right? So just something to be mindful of, that, whenever you make a new shape, it's going to pick up that pre-existing, or the one that you created before that. So did that make sense, Flynn? I want you to jump in, man.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's like a huge time saver. I kind of assumed that you would either need to kind of copy and paste the original shape, or you have to start from scratch each time you're kind of creating an asset. But that's really cool. That's quite intuitive. I like that a lot.
Yeah, so I could actually still take this shape here and duplicate it, and I can do that by creating a duplicate of that down here, or again, right mouse button clicking and creating
Rice Mountain.
Duplicate there. Rice Mountain. You can tell I didn't have lunch,
hungry.
Flynn.
Yeah.
So I've got my object here. So I'm going to create something like this, which is this other shape. And you can see there's a couple of different options that I can do there. I might just scale that down a little bit. And again, I'm just going to rotate that round so it's orientated in the right way. Bring it across here, bring it down. So now what I'm going to show you is where you're merging these two shapes. Again, think of it like a piece of clay, and I'm just adding clay pieces onto this main structure. So I can come down here, and if I wanted to, I could play with a couple of those parameters. Maybe, I can change the pinch type, whatever I want it to be. I'm just trying to just work out what the best shape is for me. If I didn't want it big, whoops, I'm just going to revert that because I can see. Then I'm just tweaking this shape. So I've got something I like there. Now, if I hit apply, it merges it with that one piece, that main piece now, right? So you can see it's with that. And if I go back into that shape and I hit layer, and I can now select it as one layer. So it's added it to that layer for me.
Oh, cool. So by you mean adding it to the layer, it's kind of made it a bit of a group, like if you're thinking about other apps. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I could have done that a couple of different ways. So actually, if I just take that back again, I'm just doing Control Z, which is what you pointed out, and I'm just going to double click off that. I can see this is added as a one layer here. If I go, and when you double click into the actual canvas or into a blank area out here, you can see over here that it actually swapped out of my clay tool into my select tool. So instead of me coming over here and going back like that, it's just a shortcut to go back into my selection tool. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yep. So, and the other thing is that now I've got that piece there, I'm going to go add new layer. So I'm going to add this piece now to a new layer as well. So then if I go back to my, First, what I have to do is I have to remember to apply it. It's a bit of a tricky one because you have to remember to actually go, yes, I want that to be there before you change anything. So let's just take that back for a sec, and I'll bring that back up and move that across. So this is working nicely. I'm going to drop that down there, hit apply. Okay, so I've applied it now, and now that when I click out of that, I've saved it as a separate layer. Again, I just did that shortcut, and I've got 2 layers now, one there, one there.
Right.
But it's two separate pieces, so I can at any stage go, cool, I just want to move that round or change it. It's remained separate from that piece because I didn't want to combine them. I just wanted them on blank, 2 separate layers.
That's cool.
So I've got my shape there. I might go back to my square, and you can see there it's really large. I might revert that back, and we've got that there. Again, I'm just going to use my scale tool. The cool thing with this as well, and I think you would have experienced this in VR, Flynn, is just that it's just a lot more natural in terms of pushing and pulling, and you're really getting involved with it. I'm using my mouse, and it's just very much transforming objects and positioning. Whereas in the VR, you're moving around that object, and it's just I don't know. I find it a lot more engaging and immersive.
Right.
So I'm just going to scale that out a little bit.
And how long have you used other apps to design in VR before, to try it out before Modeler came along?
No, never actually.
Right.
No, so that was the first experience for me. So like I said, because of the limited functions and UIs, it's really easy to pick up and be able to start playing with. So I'm just going to modify this wing here. I might just do some tapering, actually rounding of the edges, and I might just even fill it a little bit there and chamfer it. So I can do something like that.
That's cool. So the options there were like rounding the edges, tapering.
Yeah, exactly. So you can see rounding there, and we've got chamfer and thickness. And what I'll do here, actually, I'll just reset that, and I'll just double click on that, and I'll show you those options. So we've got and I'll start with the thickness because that actually is quite cool. And you can see if you give it some value there, it actually hollows that piece out.
Oh, right.
So you can then dictate, okay, how big do I want that hole, or how fine do I want it, just using that slider. And then there's also the rounding pieces like that. And maybe I want to, tapering is just tapering one section of it to taper it down. And rounding just rounds out the edges. So like I said, there's a few different options there. And I'm going to revert that back, and I'm just going to go around, and I'm just going to turn that over because we're going to use something like, actually, I'm going to go back that way and scale that down. Pull that in a little bit and change the thickness like that.
Yeah, cool. So you can very quickly, if you hadn't tried 3D before, and you sort of see starting off as a cube and sort of thinking, what do I do? How does this work? But all of those tools over there make it very, very quick. So I assume some of those tools are the really common things that people are generally going to want to do, like rounded corners, tapering the edges, having, I can't remember the word for it, but you have one side going to, something larger. Very, very quickly you've created, I assume, wings for a plane. That's my guess at where we're going with this.
Yeah, exactly. So and you're right. So they've limited the number of features, but obviously thought about which ones are important that you can that you're going to need. I mean, most of these are pretty common with most 3D programs. Right. So it's pretty stock standard, but it's again, you're not just being frustrated by so many options. And the one thing that I did find is when you're starting to build something out, a lot of times you'll have to go, okay, well, what shape? And I'm going to show you something in a sec. I'll just create this one quickly, and I'm just going to turn this one up. And again, I'm just going to hold down the control, rotate that up into 90, scale that back a little bit, pull that up, and I'll just bring that down a fraction, something like that. So for example, I wanted to, get more of that, and I can just change that rounding so it's not quite as harsh as that. But say, for example, with that back, what do you call that, Flynn? What is that called? Back?
The fin?
The fin, yeah. What do you call that, Flynn? It's fin.
Yeah.
So with that back,
you almost
flick,
got it. It was just the L getting in the way.
with that back fin, I'm going to create a new layer there. So I've created that back fin on a separate layer. And what I can do here is now I've got that and I've got that added there. I'm going to apply that. So I'm saying, yep, I'm happy with that. But I want to cut that. I want to cut a shape out of that. So what I can do here is just actually. So I've got a shape, maybe this one here, and let's just reset that a little bit, revert that back, and I've got this crazy sort of shape here. I'm going to rotate that up, and I'm going to position this so that it intersects that piece that I've just created. So we can see there that I'm just lining that up a little bit, and I'm going to scale that up. And you can see we've got our dots there. I'm going to scale that up, or I could have used the size here if you can't, access that dot very easily. And next thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to translate that up. And you can see here what I'm thinking is, how do I get that shape? Sort of that fin shape. So I've just looked at these shapes and gone, oh, actually, if I cut that away, I might be able to get something that's kind of close to where I need it to be. So if I move to the next tool below this clay tool, it's called Erase tool. And wherever it's intersecting, it's going to cut that piece out. So if I hit apply, you can see now it's actually using that shape to cut away from that other object.
Right.
Which is pretty cool.
That's awesome.
So there's a few different options. And now that we're in the Erase tool, I'm going to show you how this works as well. So again, I've got the option to be able to select any of these various shapes. If I can control the size of that here, or if I just do control and left mouse button click, I can also do it this way as well. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. But now I've got this shape selected and it's small. There's a couple of ways. So you can see I've got this gizmo that's around it. But if I wanted to actually cut something away on the surface of this, then there's there's a couple of options down the bottom here. So there's one that's called surface. So if I click on that one, now it's part of my brush. So
okay.
I can then easily, because I've got this one here selected, see how I can just cut away using this as a brush.
Right.
If I change that shape to say this, you can see how it's using that shape to actually erase certain areas of my model.
So you can kind of use it like a stamp. You could create a shape and then use it a bit like a stamp along, or you could create it so it's a bit like a brush as well.
Exactly. So,
that's cool.
And there's a couple of different options with the Erase tool. So you can use stamps. So you've got, and I'm going to get into stamps in a little bit. So you were sort of jumping out here a little bit, but I'll stay within here. But again, you can cut out these different shapes and be able to add to that. So if we stay in here, so there's a couple of different options, and the split tool, essentially, if I grab this box shape here, and maybe I'm going to do, and I've just gone back to this gizmo placement, and I've got this box here, and I'm just going to position this, and I'll show you how this works. I'm going to scale that box up, and if I now hit apply, it's going to split this section here out and create a new layer for me. So maybe I wanted to extract a piece from that. So I'll show you what I mean. I'll hit apply. And if I go back to the, oops, did that not work? So let's go back to that. And, because one thing to note there, and you can see how it's that darker color, is because I haven't got that layer selected. So again, if I just double click on the window here, go back into there, and now I go back and now I've got that section that I wanted to split. I've got that selected, and I go back into my erase tool. I've got the split section here. Now if I hit apply, you'll see what it's done. So I'm just going to move. Oh, did that actually do anything? Oh, there we go. Sorry. And if I just go back, see how it split it out, that section,
Right.
and it created a new layer for me. So it's just a really quick way to be able to go, oh, I just want to be able to split this whole thing up and be able to modify it. And I can come back in here and be able to change this part of my model if I need to.
That's cool. Like, so if you made something, because I'm very new to 3D, so just thinking in 3D, like building something, kind of building out a basic shape, but then you might come back into it and want some more detail. Like you might want to build out the cockpit or something, or you might want it. So would you do something like that for that? Like, okay, I'm going to take this bit out because I've built this engine in a different file or something and brought it in, or would you build everything in one sort of sitting, one go?
Yeah, I mean, you can build sections. So you could actually go, all right, I'm going to build the main body part over here, and then over here I'm going to build out the cockpit that I can. Because the thing with it is that you can scale things up. So maybe you're working quite big and you're detailing that cockpit, and then you can scale that down and drop it back in. So you can be working on several pieces. Or actually, I could import in a mesh. So you can actually select 3D models. So I'll show you what that looks like. So if I'm going to select I think I've got something in my downloads here. So maybe it's I don't know, just what do we got? Emergency. I don't even. Let's bring in. Let's bring in a tire. So it's an FBX. This is a model that we've downloaded from the 3D asset library. So I'm going to import that in, and you can see it's ticking over there. Oh, I'll scale back. So we've got our tire. You can see that it's actually really big. Oops. Sorry, I need to just redo that. So I've got the tire, but there's one thing to note here. When you first bring it in, it's not a piece of clay, so we can't work on it straight away. So if you right click, there's this. Sorry, I need to select it. Select it, right click on it, and see how there's a convert to clay.
Right.
So just to go back on that, I've imported in that 3D model. I've gone to my select tool, selected the tire, right click, and now I need to convert this to clay. So that means then I can use that warp tool. I can use those other tools that I was just showing in there to be able to start manipulating the space model. So it's merging.
That's great. So so this is an object file. You called it a mesh before. What's the difference between the two, or are they synonymous?
Yeah, it's so it's a 3D model. So this was like, when I go back to there, it's like an FBX or OBJ model. So when you think of people that when you create something in a 3D modeling program, and you export out that model, it's like exporting out a Photoshop file, a PSD. In 3D, we export it out as an FBX or an OBJ, or there's other file formats. Just the same as the same world as in 2D. There's just various formats that you can select. Oops, I don't want to do that again.
And Johanna in chat has compared it to like turning a vector into a bitmap. So I guess it's similar
exactly.
sort of thing.
Yeah, no, that's a really good analogy actually, because they are quite different. You've got a 3D model, and this is actually that's a really good analogy actually. I'm going to use that. Thank you.
10 points to you, Johanna.
Yeah. So now we've got that. So now like you were saying before, Flynn, I could be over here working on a different part of this aircraft and manipulating this mesh. So I've got that here now, so I can just bring that across. One thing, if there's no materials assigned to it, it will come in white, and sometimes it's really hard to see details of your object. So there is a paint tool down the bottom here. See this little brush icon? So if I click on that and I just bring up the scale of my, I'm just going to select that. I'm going to bring up the scale of my brush. And maybe I'm just going to make sure I've got a color selected here, and I can just usually should be able to paint that.
And is there a reason why it's white compared to the clay of the other colors? Oh, because it didn't convert completely, I think.
Yeah, well, I just didn't have any color or materials assigned to it.
Okay, yep.
Oh, you there, Flynn?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, sorry. I thought I lost you.
Yeah, it's the stream's trying to catch up a little bit, I think, when we were trying to do anything too kind of crazy in the app. Kind of all freaked out for a second, but I think we're back.
Okay, cool. So I'm just going to put that on it. I'm just going to select, put it there, and oh, see, it's picking up. Oh, that wouldn't be paint on it actually. What is that? But
I think
I just like to paint
I think Alwyn. I think this file is trying to do too much in Modeler because we're losing your audio and everything. So maybe we delete that and just go back to doing the clay stuff because every time you move it, the stream freaks out a little bit.
Okay, cool. All right, let's just do this. Let's go back to here.
It's probably like some enormous file, and then every time something happens, it's referencing like somewhere on your hard drive or something, and it's giving all the juice to that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what was happening there as well was that that the brush was so big, I couldn't see where the brush radius was, but it was actually when I worked out where it was probably not helping the cause. Let's just go back to here. So just one thing, actually, this is good. So by default, Modeler does do autosave as well. So for situations like this, sometimes it crashes or whatever, then there is an autosave in here that you can pick up on. So, maybe I can just go back to this one here, load the scene up, and we should have something as a starting point, maybe. Let's just bring it. You know what? Sometimes it happens where, okay, cool. No, we've got nothing there. Oh, okay. That was something that I was creating the other day.
Totally different file.
Yeah, look at that. Look at that plane. But that's totally fine because the cool thing with this is it's just really going through the interface. So it doesn't, whether we create a plane or a plant, it doesn't really matter. So you can import in your own meshes like we just saw then. You can also export out. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. So if I click into export, there's a few things here. So you can see those file formats that we were talking about before. So whether it's an OBJ or an FBX, then I can select any one of these. And generally, I don't play around too much with these settings. I might increase the topology count. So what I mean, and I'm not going to get too caught up in the jargon here, but when we're exporting this out and we want to have this really nice detail on it, we want to be able to, and I'll show you what that looks like. So if I've got resolution, can you see that, Flynn, when I hover on resolution and it's giving us those little squares?
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to just actually go File, New. Right, so right click and we go resolution. So if I increase that resolution, watch what happens to those little squares. See how they get smaller?
Right.
So what that means is that this is it's actually holding more information so that when we've got these nice details, it will actually, when you export out the model, there's enough information to be able to kind of capture that information. If that makes sense. I don't want to get caught up in the technical again.
It does to me. I might ask a technical question though. So when we talk about like in something like gaming and we talk about how many polygons there are, is that the same sort of thing or is that something else?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it.
Okay.
That's exactly it. So if I right click on that again and I just have a look at that resolution, cool. So if I now bring something like this and I'll just stick it so we can do something like this, and you can see there, see how, whoops, and I'll just go back to my select tool.
We made a piece of Lego.
There we go. A simple shape. But you can see how smooth that transition is now.
Right.
So okay. if I right click and I go and I drop that resolution down and down and down, you can see, and it's pretty. You can see there's some some line work happening there. So it It's exactly what you said. It's just basically how dense that base mesh is.
So if you were having like computer issues, like let's say things are going a little bit slow, or you're building something fairly complex, would you tend to kind of build in a lower, like on the lower settings, and then at the end like up everything? Because I've found that I've had to do that sometimes in 3D.
Yeah, probably not with this, because what's happening is that it's actually inheriting that resolution. So you pretty much want to start at the resolution that you want to work in.
Right,
Otherwise, if I go now, so for example, when we look at that, we've got some, nice resolution on it. If I now go up here and I'm going to create another shape, maybe this one here, and if I just do, so we've applied that, and I've got that piece there. I'm just going to transform that for a sec, and then just bring that out. So we've got that piece there, and let's have a look at the resolution. You can see how big the squares are there.
Mm-hmm.
But when we look at the Lego piece, you see how small they are. You can see that, Flynn? See how the small ones, the size of the squares are different, right?
Yeah.
Equal to this piece here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I add this piece to here, and maybe I want to I could apply that. Then if I move that out, see what does that? You see how the resolution is different between the two. So depending on if you're trying to do nice transitions like we have with these two pieces, you want to try and maintain that resolution so that you're getting these nice edges. If it's just cutting away like that, you want to have
the consistency. Like you would generally build everything exactly the same resolution at whatever your end goal is. So you kind of have to think where it's going to go at the beginning. Okay.
And again, if I was to use something like that, I can increase that resolution on that ball and see how it's affecting both those balls now. And I'm getting, so if I was to do, and I wanted to cut that away, and I hit play. Because I've not selected that layer, I need to select off that base layer, go back into there, and just bring that back up, and I'm going to cut that out. So I hit apply. Sorry, I need to cut it out like that. Hit apply, and you can see how it's getting. It's quite a smooth edge. If the bigger those squares are, the rougher these. It's exactly like what Johanna said with the pixelation of a JPEG.
Right.
The bigger your pixels are, the anti-aliasing is not going to be smooth. Just think of it like that. So let's move on from that, because that's getting technical.
No, that's great. I mean, especially analogies like to other apps to help designers kind of transition across. Like I think the analogies really help. It certainly helps me to kind of understand things like I think Johanna as well in chat, what we're chatting about. Almost there. It was like Pathfinder tool. So like when we're stamping something out, it's like the Pathfinder tool in Photoshop or Illustrator, which like a lot of designers will be really used to. And thinking about it in that way is like, oh, it's like Pathfinder, but in 3D.
Exactly. No, that's great. I love that. We should adopt more of those sort of analogies for the 3D stuff and just actually have a whole session based on that. This is what it means in the 2D world.
Yeah, and even if when you get really deep into it, it kind of behaves in a different way, and technically it's not the same thing, that's fine. But if it's just to think about it like this, and then when you get deep enough into it, you'll have understood it, really well by that point. So, yeah. So
Lego cheese, that's it. So I just wanted to show here, there's a couple of different settings in terms of so I'm using a mouse, but you could be using a Wacom tablet, so it respects pressure sensitivity. So, and then there's a couple of options down here, which if you're wanting to do it just makes it nice and smooth with the steady rather than that sort of jaggedy edge. If I come back over here and I've got steady taken off, you get that, you can sort of see that riveting or the actual path there. Again, if I use steady, you just get a nice smooth flow.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And there's also single. So maybe I just, instead of, it just does, again, I'm using pressure. So I'll turn pressure off and then just do single rather than a path.
Right.
So there's a couple of different options there that you can play around with. I really love steady though, because it smooths everything out so nicely.
Mm.
Turn single off. So it's really nice to work with.
Yeah.
Moving down to the next, and again, you can just think of these shapes as your kind of brush, really. Again, if I wanted to use a square here and be able to cut that out, then I can do that. Or I wanted to use one of these other shapes, I'm just using that to cut out. If I move to the next tool, it's the warp tool. So this not too dissimilar to what you'd find in Photoshop in some ways, actually. I'm just being able to actually move sections of my model based on my pressure and on my size. If I have hardness set to 100% and I click on something like that, you can see that it's giving us that no fall off whatsoever from our brush. So I can just bring that back, and maybe I want to have the size somewhere around a bit smaller, and the strength. So this, maybe I wanted to break up this edge here, for example, when it wasn't so straight, then I could just start pushing and pulling things away like that. Or if I wanted to really just break up that surface so it wasn't so smooth. And we'll get into this when I do my little robot character, because he's perfect for being able to break up some of these hard edges. But you're just warping the mesh essentially.
Oh, we have a question from chat. What's your favorite brush to use in here? Would you have a favorite one? Is it?
I actually quite like. I actually like this guy here, the spline, and there's a feature that's only in VR, but you can actually take this brush and be able to create sort of muscles, and you can hold the top end and the bottom end and be able to deform it. You can't do it in the desktop version, unfortunately, but I'll show you what that looks like on Thursday's session. But this is probably my favorite brush, to be honest. I really like it just because you're able to get some really nice organic shapes with it.
Little plug for Thursday's stream there. So if you missed the start, we'll be doing part 2 in VR. You don't have to be in VR. I won't be in VR. Actually, Chris will be here, but Alwyn will be in VR, which is going to be pretty interesting. This little spiky.
Yeah, I just like, so yeah, we'll just get into the next one. So that's the I'm just in the clay tool there, but we were just in the warp tool. A few different options there. You've got your different primitives. There's another one here which is elastic, which is something similar, where you can just push, but it's just got a bit more. And you can see there that it's actually taking a bit more computation as well. So hopefully the stream doesn't get affected. So I won't play with that too much. But it's just doing a lot more computation with moving that geometry around. Next tool is Build Up. And this is a fun one if you've got a surface. And maybe I'll just go File, New. I'm just going to do that. And I'm going to just do a nice little, maybe I'll go back to my favorite one here. And I'm just going to pinch, bring that up. I'm going to taper that so it's kind of like that, and we'll bring that radius up a little bit, and it's going to bring it something like a bean shape. So I've got this build up tool. Whoops, sorry, I go back to that. I always forget to push apply or hit the space bar just to commit to it. So I've got that one there. Now I'm going to go back to my build up tool, and this is really cool because this is where I'm able to sort of sculpt on the mesh, and I'm going to bring my size down a little bit, and then I can just actually start giving it some texture on the surface there. So maybe this was like a cocoa bean or something like that. I can sit there and just be able to start adding this detail.
Looks like a long lemon to me.
Yeah, a long lemon. One of those really rough ones that I don't like.
Yeah, exactly. Well, now it does when you've added this texture to it.
You always cut these ones open and there's just no juice in it at all.
Yeah, I don't know what they're thinking. So as we're getting towards the end, I've got a quick question just talking about texture and everything like that. So you're adding texture, but you're affecting the mesh, right? You're affecting the actual mesh of what it is. So it's no longer a smooth geometric thing. You're adding bumps and divots and things like that into the clay, right?
Exactly. So I'm just adding sculptural detail. Everything in this is just sculptural details being added to this base mesh here.
Yeah. And if you wanted to add, because we've done streams before with other apps within the Substance universe, and there's probably a fruit like pattern, I forget the name, like texture that you could put over, like someone's probably made apple and someone's probably made orange and all that sort of stuff. So if you wanted to apply that, you wouldn't do that in Modeler, would you? You would be exporting this out and you'll be doing it in another app. Is that right?
Exactly. So you can export this model out, then bring it into Substance Painter and add those materials straight onto it. So
right.
I'll be doing that with the robot character. I'm going to model that up in Modeler, export that out, bring it into Painter, add some materials, export that out, bring it into Stager, do our final render so that we get this image here. We're going to get this image here by the end of it. So yeah, I mean, if people were able to get their hands on the program, then the desktop version, then we can definitely play around and be able to keep up to speed with where I'm at as well. Cool. So yeah, so here I'm just adding that sort of textural detail. There's the next tool down, which is the smooth tool. You can hit shift on your key. So if I'm in, the sculpting tools and maybe I'm in the crease tool, if I hit shift and you can see there, it's automatically jumping to my smooth tool over here.
Yeah.
So that just allows me to, and I'll just bring that strength down, but just to kind of put that nice, and it just smooths everything out. So again, it's dependent on how close I am to my model in the viewport. So if I'm this close, it's quite a wide radius, so I can bring that radius down, be able to sculpt on, smooth it over. Quite a common workflow. So if I'm using my clay tool here, for example, I'm just going to pull that one out to jump between sort of sculpting and smoothing. So I'm just going to do that one, apply that one again. So if I'm up here, say sculpting, and I might do it on the surface and I might be adding details to this. I'm going to bring that size down. I'm going to click on it just to revert it back to the normal shape. Again, I can use my keyboard shortcut to scale that down, and maybe I'm just wanting to add some of these details on here. So right. I can just scale that up a little bit. So I can add that detail, hit the shift, and smooth that off. Go back to sculpting, adding that detail, whatever it may be. Jump back into shift, smooth things off.
That's great. Hey, we're just about out of time, actually. So we're going to have to call it there. Thanks, everyone, for being with us today. So as we've said many times now, we'll be back on Thursday. We're going to be trying some VR, live streaming VR into a new app. So it's going to be fun and experimental. But, we're pretty excited. Chris Hansen will be here hosting. I'll be taking a back seat, just sitting there and taking notes. But yeah, Alwyn, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for showing us Modeler. I'm super pumped. I have it installed and I'm mucking around with it, which is really fun. Yeah, thanks for stepping us through everything.
No problem. Yeah, hopefully there's a good starting point for everybody to be able to pick it up. Like I said, there's some documentation. Go into the help. Look at some of the video tutorials that have been output already. They're fantastic for being able to learn it from the ground up. So thanks everybody for jumping on today, and looking forward to Thursday's session.
Excellent. All right, we'll see you on Thursday. Bye,
nice
everyone.
one, Flynn. Thanks, buddy.
Cheers.